Welcome back. It's 3 and Out here on this Thursday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben, glad to be talking to you about a win because I haven't been able to do that much in this Marlins series with the Braves, and the Marlins bullpen does what it's been doing. Unfortunately, A.J. Minter gets the win, I guess. That's why stats can be deceiving, BJ, when you go on straight stats. A.J. Minter gets the win, did nothing win-worthy today for the Braves in the ninth inning. So you get it, you'll take it, and move on to Chicago, who's struggling quite a bit early as well.
Wow. I mean, it's crazy. You feel lucky to take 1 of 4 from Miami, the way they're playing. And look, credit the Marlins. I mean, Adam Duvall again in the ninth inning. So he was obviously ready to go against the Atlanta Braves. But Acuna continues to wow. Pablo Sandoval continues to wow. I mean, you wonder, might he get some starting opportunities moving forward with the way he's swinging the bat? The bullpen, the starting pitching is not great, but look, it's a win. You feel really good, especially considering it looked like you were going to lose that game late, but very special to see Jackie Robinson honored. It's always a special day. Glad to see that, just an American hero. So, that was awesome to continue to see. But yeah, in terms of the Braves winning, they really, really needed that one. And now they have a little bit of momentum, I guess, going out to the Midwest.
Well, yeah, I think it brought out the best in them. I mean, I think sometimes we get caught up in how good this Braves team can be, but I think that most teams, going to the top of the ninth, up 5-4, end up, losing 6-5. Most people they're gonna lose those games, not because they're not a good enough team, but just, it sucks all the life out of you. They go to the bottom of the ninth. You talk about Acuna, you talk about Freddie Free, you talk about Ozzie, you talk about Dansby, Mansby with the walk-up. I think what happens is, Kevin, sometimes you want to know what you made of. The pitching and the bullpen is not getting done for you. Okay. Pablo Sandoval, Kung Fu Panda, he's been a guy, outside of Ronald Acuna, who's going to give you what he has every night. Pablo has come alive, for the bench, but I just think that sometimes you want to know what you made of. Ronald Acuna aside, who else is going to be a guy today? And they was able to go out there and get it done. Kevin, I'm like you. Kevin's looking like, oh, my God. You don't want to get into that. Here we go again with this. But I don't like the late game heroics, but I will take them. I will take them. It's nerve-wracking. I feel like it's taking years off my life every time these Braves go into the bottom of the ninth. But, Kevin, as you mentioned, maybe this can really help this Braves team, because I know you were saying we thought it was going to be the other way. The Braves winning, 3 out of 4, and obviously them getting a big win, going to the Midwest is definitely going to help them. But Ronald Acuna Jr. right now, ladies and gentlemen, I know they were saying he's gonna be the best player in baseball. Maybe he got the memo, because this dude is about as good as you can be on a baseball field.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, and again, I think that was big today. He even came through in the ninth, got a single, but I was like, you need somebody else to step up and do something. I think that was big offensively to go out. Ender has been he had 2 hits yesterday, but has done some boneheaded things at the plate. He was able to get on and get things started with a good hit. Acuna obviously is doing what he's doing. Freddie Freeman, a great at bat, coaxes a walk. You have bases loaded, nobody out, and this has been a situation where in previous games the Braves have struggled to make things happen, and you had some good at bats from other guys on the lineup, not named Acuna. So I thought a much-needed shot in the arm for the Braves. And again, sometimes baseball is funny like that. Maybe that's a game that kind of gets your offense going a little bit, and you've seen it even against the Marlins. In a loss the other night, they scored 8, scored 6 today. So the offense is starting to put some runs on the board. You just need it to come from somebody else other than Ronald Acuna. I think I saw a stat, somebody tweeted out during the game that Acuna has either scored or driven in 43% of the Braves runs on a team with 26 other dudes on it, or 25 other dudes. That's not good. He's great, but he doesn't need to be that great in terms of driving in the production runs. And you go back and look at the fact that, Pablo Sandoval's got 3 homers in pretty big spots, driving in multiple runs. The 2 of them probably are accounting for half of all the Braves run production so far this season, and that's not good either. So I think we've seen it. One guy can do it for a little bit. One guy can't do it all the time. And Acuna is certainly trying to do that. I think the problem you run into is it's night after night here, BJ, that you feel like you have better production than what you're getting out of the bullpen right now. And again, it's not that the Braves are playing terribly. They got blasted a couple nights ago. That happens. But it's been 1 and 2. How many games have they lost in extra innings or like almost the last inning today? That's not because you're not, I mean, your record says you're not playing well, but as a team, you're playing good enough to win ball games, and you weren't able to close it out. I think today was big for an offensive psyche, but you go to Chicago, man, where I mean, you have to take the starter route. You still don't feel any better about it, right? I mean, you get to the late innings, you're like, we better be up 2 or 3 because these guys are struggling just to finish innings and get us out of here. So today was an adventure, more so than you wanted it to be, but you still have plenty of questions coming up as you head to Chicago. We got more to come. We'll continue to talk Braves baseball here in this hour. Matt Smith around the corner in the final hour of the program. We'll talk some SEC football with him. Jake Crain of the JBoy Show will join us. We'll talk Auburn football with him as the Tigers set to have their spring game this weekend with Brian Harsin, his first kind of public show as the Auburn head coach, Mike Bobo, Derek Mason in charge there. So a lot of things to check out in Auburn this weekend to kind of see what the 2021 Tigers might potentially look like. So we'll come back. We'll continue to hit on the Braves and more. It's 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network, streaming live, ESPNCoastal.com, on Twitter at Pigskin Radio. Good to have you here on this Thursday, Kevin, BJ, and Ben. Glad you're with us live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube as well. Quick update from the RBC Heritage. Stuart Sink, your first-round leader in the clubhouse at -8. Some other notables, Charles Howell, the third, 3 shots back at -5. Billy Horschel, -5. Lucas Glover, former Clemson golfer, at -4. Brian Harmon still out on the course, -4 after a solid week there at Augusta. He is 4 shots off the pace, and again still working through the back 9 there on Hilton Head this afternoon as round number 1 of the RBC is underway. A lot more to come here in the final hour. We'll talk some college football, but the Braves, BJ, continue to do it with Ronald Acuna, hottest guy in Major League Baseball offensively. Don't throw him anything. Juxtaposed with maybe one of the most struggling bullpens in baseball right now. How, if you're Brian Snitker, are you sleeping at night knowing, hey, I got one guy that's hitting the cover off everything, and if we get a lead, we can't protect it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of storylines. It was good to see some other guys get hits, get on base. Dansby Swanson had a couple of knocks, obviously had the game winner, but the bullpen, I don't know. I mean, I don't know who you trust. Matzik looked pretty good. I mean, you're waiting on Chris Martin, obviously, to return. But I wanted to ask you guys, Kevin, you mentioned him last segment. Is Sandoval a guy that you might look at as hot as he is and say, hey, man, maybe you should be our everyday third baseman with Riley hitting around 200? Or is his role specifically to be the bench power late?
Well, I mean, there's something to be said for a guy that's doing what he's doing. And I think that's the natural inclination to say, dude, why don't you just play every day? But literally, you look at how he's performing. It's like, Pablo, your job is to sit over there and talk to the guys about baseball. And then in the 8th inning, come up there and rip a baseball and then just go sit down. Like you're good. And sometimes that's your role. And when you play every day, obviously you see up here start to go like that because you kind of come back to where you're at as an everyday player. But certainly I think the way he is hitting off the bench, maybe not a bad idea to give him a start here or there and just say, look, the way you're seeing the baseball, let's go out there and see what it can get us. Certainly when you go interleague and next week, I think you go to New York and play the Yankees. He'll be a guy that's in the lineup as the DH for sure. So Pablo Sandoval is a guy that I think was not really talked about. If you remember, the Braves picked him up, I want to say late last year, and you're like, Pablo Sandoval's on the team. It's like a week before the season ran out. He was added to the roster, and you're like, okay, maybe they just are looking for somebody to shore up the bench. Then he gets the invite to spring training, and I think most people around the team were like, he's kind of an older guy, been around the block, has had a pretty nice career. Maybe he can try to battle. Maybe he'll get sent to the alternate side as a bat you can take a look at. But he got him a roster spot out of spring training, and look at what he's done. I mean, you could say he's kept you in or won 3 games already. I mean, and that is of immense value. So I think that's one where you think, he's got the cool name Kung Fu Panda, but man, nobody was talking about him coming out of spring training as a guy that was like, maybe he can provide you a little bit of something, but not to what he's been doing so far. He's been just absolutely phenomenal.
I just think too, I mean, we talk about a guy like Pablo. I mean, Kevin, you mentioned coming in the 8th to provide some power. That sounds, much harder than he's making it look right now, but he comes with a championship pedigree. And talking to those guys about baseball, when he's done what most players hope to do. He's been on championship teams. He understands what being a role player is. I mean, even when he played for the Giants, it's not, I mean, I remember, I was out there, with the Raiders at the time. People used to love him. I think what happens is sometimes somebody got to create a spark. If it's got to be Pablo, might as well. I think because just imagine if he wasn't providing that spark. Like, man, what is Pablo doing? Yeah. I think you got to congratulate guys when they go in there and get it done. I mean, he understands what his role is. He's embracing it. Because somebody kept saying, well, Ronald Acuna can't do everything. Well, maybe he can when you talk about what he provides for the offense. But until this pitching and this bullpen gets going, somebody's going to have to create that spark. If it is going to be Pablo, you can live with it for now. But I just think that this is more of Snit having to earn his paycheck, right? I mean, he's so used to look, man, we're going to win these games. Like, what in the world you mean? We might get swept by the Marlins, who we didn't even know was a playoff team last year. Because, but I just think that as long as the Braves got a dub, you can deal with everything else moving forward.
Yeah, great point on the Braves broadcast last night, saying the Braves are like a team that's hey, they have the confidence and swagger and got punched in the face, and they're kind of like, all right, now we got to figure out how to respond. We're the ones used to punching in the face, and it hasn't gone that way here early on in the season. A lot more to get to here on the show. Final hour. Matt Smith will join us. SouthernPigskin.com. We'll talk some SEC football. Jake Crain, the JBoy Show, will break down the Auburn's free game coming up this weekend and more. It's 3 and Out, Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you along here on 3 and Out, all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network, streaming live, ESPNCoastal.com, on your mobile device with the ESPN app. A lot of college football to talk to here. Big weekend in the SEC with 7 spring games coming up this weekend. Joining us here from Southern Pigskin to talk about that and more. Good friend of the show, Matt Smith, joins us. Matt, welcome. How are you?
Hello. I didn't even realize there were 7. That's a good note, Kevin. Half the league playing spring games this weekend. Certainly check a few out, and should be fun.
How, of all people, did you not know this? Like, you are the arbiter of everything.
Spring's just a little bit different this year. Everyone's kind of doing their own thing. Not a lot of TV coverage. Keep an eye on it as best I can, of course. But I will certainly be checking out what color suit jacket Nick Saban is wearing, and maybe a couple other anecdotes I can pick up on Saturday.
Yeah, we've got a lot of games coming up, Alabama being one of them. I mean, this is a team loaded with talent. We're going to hear a lot of names called 2 weeks from today in the NFL draft. What intrigues you about Nick Saban's bunch as they get ready for spring game? Obviously, you have Bryce Young, the guy everybody's heard about. I'm assuming he's going to be the starter moving forward.
Yeah, not expecting. I don't think it's official that there's not a quarterback competition, but I don't expect there to be one. Certainly for the backup job, there will be, but I think it's pretty clearly going to be Bryce Young's gig. So probably won't glean a lot from Saturday, but seeing if anything looks a little bit different under Bill O'Brien, returning to the college game for the first time in 6 or 7 years now. But I think the 2 positions to watch are going to be the ones that we see go off the board a lot in the first round. And a fortnight from now will be wide receiver and offensive line. John Mechie's going to be the number 1 in the fall. Been out this spring with an injury, so haven't seen much of him. And then behind Slade Bolden, there's not really anyone with a lot of production there. Got a trio, I think, in the sophomore class that could rise up and turn into a good number 2 guy. Javon Baker, Trayshawn Holden are probably the 2 names to watch there. So definitely going to be fun to look at this young receiving core. Offensive line, obviously not going to be able to tell a lot from a spring game, but losing Landon Dickerson, the heart and soul of that line, possible first-round pick in Alex Leatherwood, probably another top 100 pick in Deontay Brown. A couple starters back, but that unit's going to look a lot different. New position coach this year, a guy you guys are all very familiar with down there, and Doug Marrone. So those are the 2 positions to watch. Much different team than last year in terms of structure. That defense is loaded, losing really only Christian Barmore and Patrick Surtain among kind of the key contributors there. Maybe a throwback Alabama team. Probably not going to be quite like 2011 in terms of a great defense and minimal offense. Maybe a more balanced team than we saw last year that was clearly dominated by the offense.
Matt, what does Bill O'Brien want to do? What is his goal schematically in terms of the identity for Alabama's offense?
That's a great question about how he will marry it with Nick Saban. Certainly 2 pretty big personalities, and hard to take much from what he did in the NFL. And at Penn State, he had 2 very non-mobile quarterbacks, Matt McGloin first and then Christian Hackenberg. So Bryce Young, a little more mobile, not really a dual threat per se, and certainly not the talent of a Deshaun Watson, which he's coached the last 4 years in Houston. But that'll be interesting to watch. I don't have a great sense of that. Again, we might see a little bit of that on Saturday. But marrying those 2 personalities, obviously we know Saban's a defensive guy, but it's still Nick Saban's team. It's going to be what Nick Saban wants to do. He's changed coordinators pretty much every year. So the continuity comes from his approach, not necessarily what the coordinators want to do. So obviously they want to put their own stamp on things, but that's kind of hard to do when you're only there for a year, maybe 2 years at a time in the case of Sark. But it's interesting to watch, but definitely a little different player than he had in Bryce Young compared to what he was working with at Penn State back in the early part of last decade.
And man, I mean, you mentioned that this Alabama team could go back to more of a throwback, just a real stifling defense, trying to figure out what type of balance you want on offense. How much more dangerous does that make Alabama when they're going back to, quote, boring football, but making things really, really rough on the opposing squad?
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to, like I said, Ben, I don't think we're going to be quite like 2011 in that 9-6 LSU game. And Nick Saban has admitted the way the game has gone, it's an offensive game right now, and that's fine. But just looking at the experience on this team, again, you just can't replace the talent we're going to see come off the board in 2 weeks. That is just as big of a number of losses at a side of the ball I've seen in my time following college football in terms of talent gone. Certainly plenty in the pipeline there, but without the experience, it's going to have to be a noticeable dip this year. And defensively, I just love everything about that unit right now. We saw the secondary really emerge after getting picked apart a little bit early in the season there by Ole Miss in a couple games. They locked it down. come Notre Dame, come Ohio State. I think they'll be loaded. Again, losing really only Surtain from that secondary. Love the two edge rushers, Will Anderson, a young guy, Chris Allen. They're going to get after the passer. Just love everything about that defense. So, yeah, again, maybe a balance between the 2011 team and the 2020 team. And they're still averaging, 35 a game, but that defense is, putting a lot of teams under 10 points like we saw back in the day.
Matt, obviously, you talked about the draft talent going. I mean, Alabama's still projected to be number one. Nick Saban recruiting like nobody else. I mean, has anybody closed the gap on them? I know we've seen Georgia get close and some other teams, but despite all their efforts, has anybody got any closer to unseating Alabama from just the preseason? Hey, they're going to be the ones to win it. Maybe this team. I mean, where's the rest of the league to Alabama right now?
I do think this team's more gettable than last year's was. I think this is a massive year for Georgia. Obviously, playing Clemson right out of the gate, and for their sake, hopefully we'll see Alabama in December. I think 11-2 with losses to those two teams is a miserable failure for Georgia this year. They have to get one of those teams. And I think losing to Alabama last year was probably not that big of a disappointment. This year, I think that would be. They should be right there. Every player on that roster was recruited by Kirby Smart directly. We know where those classes have been ranked, so they need to be good. And a loss to Alabama should be considered nothing but a disappointment. No moral victory whatsoever. So I think they're up there. I think Clemson, I'd probably go with Clemson number one right now. I think I like DJ Oyongole just a tad better than Bryce Young. He's obviously played a bit more, had that huge spotlight game last year against Notre Dame where he played pretty well in defeat. So I think it's a bit more wide open this year. I'd probably go Clemson 1, Alabama 2, Georgia 3, very high on Oklahoma. Spencer Rattler, I think, is QB1 in the country going into the season. So I think this might be their best shot to finally break through and win a playoff game. But yeah, I think some of the other teams have, I don't know if Alabama's come back to the pack at all. Again, what we're going to see 2 weeks from now, how can you say that this team is completely on par with that when all that talent's gone? So huge year for Georgia, huge year for Oklahoma. Clemson will be very good, of course, less pressure on them. But in terms of this is the year to go get some of these teams, I think Georgia and Oklahoma are the two teams I point to and say, all right, guys, you've taken a couple swings at the pinata, haven't connected. This is your year. Go do it.
Matt, what has Alabama had that Georgia has not? Or I guess what's the difference right now? Both teams have their spring game on Saturday. What's the difference in your mind between Alabama and Georgia, and how close is that margin?
Yeah, I think it's pretty small right now. I mean, the quarterback is certainly even, I would say. I like JT Daniels maybe more than some. So I could even see where you could give Georgia the edge, given that he's played a full year at USC and I think 4 or 5 games at the end of last year where he looked pretty good compared to Bryce Young. Defense, there's certainly more losses for Georgia than Alabama. But again, that side of the ball is recruited as well as any side of the ball in the country in terms of what Kirby's brought in on the defensive side of the ball. So receiver, you probably give Georgia the edge. Again, you go position by position. I think it could end up, 50-50, 5 positions to Georgia, 6 positions to Alabama, something like that. So on paper, I think they're pretty even. The recruiting rankings would suggest as much, but when it comes to the fourth quarter on Saturdays, who you taking, Nick or Kirby? And that's where it's not close right now. And can Kirby break through and get over the hump? Again, just a huge year for Georgia because I think this Alabama team is gettable. And on paper, they certainly have the talent to finally get through and knock the Tide off and hand Nick Saban a loss to one of his assistants for the first time ever.
And, man, I mean, even sticking with that whole Alabama versus Georgia, they both got the 5 stars. They say that Alabama really got a 5-star culture compared to Georgia. They got 5 stars next to their name. I think they're still trying to figure out that culture right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly how you would classify that gap there. It's certainly probably been frustrating for Georgia fans to see that, like I was saying. But again, talent is obviously number one in college football. But when it comes down to Saturday and the talent gaps are not that small, it comes down to some of those big time decisions. And we just haven't seen those from Georgia in the key moments. So will this year be any different? I can't say for sure without seeing it, but again, all the stars are aligned for them this year, and Kirby's going to get Nick. Go do it this year.
Matt Smith, SouthernPigskin.com, joining us here on 3 and Out. Matt, who is a team you think has the best chance to kind of make the most steps forward here heading into the fall?
Most steps forward. I think the most intriguing team is LSU, because I think the floor is pretty darn low given how we saw them crater last year. But we know with the way they've recruited, the ceiling should be pretty high. So how's that quarterback position shake out between probably three different guys? TJ Finley, Max Johnson, and Miles Brennan, the starter last year. I think that's probably the most fascinating team in terms of, again, the ceiling to floor gap. I think at LSU is probably the widest of any team in the league. Obviously, Auburn's always interesting. What is that offense going to look like? I think we talked about a couple weeks back how Brian Harsin was pretty good at Boise about marrying his run-pass preferences to the talent he has around him. That would suggest, I think, a pretty run-heavy approach for Auburn this year with Tank Bigsby and a very experienced offensive line. A ton of losses at the receiving core there with both Seth Williams and Anthony Schwartz gone. So Auburn, LSU, those two pair of Tigers I'm very interested in. SEC East is boring. I'm sorry. I think it's clear Georgia 1, clear Florida 2, maybe an interesting battle for 3 with Missouri and Kentucky. We kind of know what they are, low ceiling teams, fairly well coached, it seems like. Pretty impressed with Drankowitz. And we know Stoops is pretty much maxed out what he's going to do at Kentucky. They're going to be a consistent 6 to 8 win team every year, and that's just fine. And then 3, I think, really terrible teams at the bottom. So SEC East, to me, right now, it's pretty boring. But I think a lot of intrigue in the West. What does A&M do without Kellen Mond? They'll get probably their biggest game at Kyle Field since Johnny Manziel era when Alabama comes there. Could this be the year? Again, I don't think so. But I think most of the intrigue by far is in the West as we start to wrap up the spring here and head into the summer.
An LSU spring game on Saturday. Could we see a quarterback answer to on Saturday, or is that competition going to continue into the fall?
I can't imagine it won't continue into the fall. It'll probably continue into September as well. They've all played, a decent amount of football. Brennan was probably the most experienced pre-2020, but last year, it was pretty spread evenly with Brennan starting the first couple games and then Finley for a few and then Johnson closing out and playing very well in that big win at Florida. So maybe it gets narrowed down to 2 as we see how the reps shake out in the spring game, but I don't think we'll have any good sense of who the starter is until way closer to the season. Kind of interesting opener for them at UCLA. Long trip out there. Pretty good team in the Bruins. Certainly not quite to the town of LSU, but if you're peeking ahead to week 1 games, not including Clemson, Georgia, I think that LSU-UCLA game could be a lot of fun. I'm sure if travel restrictions are gone by then, a lot of purple and gold making their way out to Southern California for that one.
And man, I know you're saying this might be, if they are beatable, this got to be the year for Georgia to beat Alabama. I know that Bryce Young, big time talent. How good can he be this year when you got outside of John Mechie? It's another Devonta Smith for the Alabama Crimson Tide. I'm pretty sure they're not related. How good can Bryce Young, is he ready to take the center stage in an offense that's seemingly throwing the ball more than they running it these days?
Of course, I think that's the first thing I'm looking for on Saturday, Ben, is what does that receiving core look like with Mechie again, probably not going to be out there in the spring. Certainly way fewer advantages for Bryce Young than Mac Jones had last year in terms of supporting cast. So, I think that's fascinating. But again, I just go back to those, especially the first Penn State team Bill O'Brien coached, where he turned Matt McGloin into, maybe a backup at best, to a very competent Big Ten starter in his first year at Penn State with, again, not a lot of talent around him given the situation they were going through back then. So certainly a lot higher pedigree guy in Bryce Young. So I'm high on Bill O'Brien. I know his personality is quite gruff. It didn't end well in Houston. But I think this works out well. We've seen reclamation projects many times over at Alabama with Lane Kiffin, with Steve Sarkisian. And I think stock will be super high on Bill O'Brien by the end of the season, partially due to him and, of course, partially due to the talent Bryce Young has. But absolutely, Ben, that supporting cast compared to what Mac Jones had, not even close, even as well as Alabama has recruited. Again, a historically great talent departure from Tuscaloosa after last season.
Matt Smith, SouthernPigskin.com, our guest here on 3 and Out. Matt, always a pleasure catching up. Thanks much. We'll talk soon.
You bet, guys. See ya.
Appreciate it. Matt Smith joining us here on 3 and Out. Alabama, one of the 7, going to have spring games coming up this weekend in the SEC. We'll come back. A lot of new faces there in Auburn. Brian Harsin is head coach, Mike Bobo, Derek Mason, and at the coordinator spots, what are they looking like here for their spring game Saturday? Jake Crain, host of the JBoy Show, will join us when we come back. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Jay and Ben. Of course, spring games going on this weekend. Auburn, now one of those as well. And joining us here, host of the JBoy Show, Jake Crain, joins us here on 3 and Out. Jake, welcome. How are you?
Doing great, man. Appreciate y'all having me on.
Yeah, appreciate you coming on. This, obviously, if you're an Auburn fan, this should be a fun experience coming up on Saturday. Anytime there's a new coach in town, you kind of get your first glimpse there at the spring game. But Brian Harsin, Mike Bobo in as offensive coordinator, Derek Mason in as defensive coordinator. What do you expect to see from Auburn on Saturday?
Oh, yeah. Well, when I look at the spring game, a lot of it is circumstantial. And you have Brian Harsin, a guy coming in that, you really haven't seen a lot of, hired a brand new staff. There's a lot of unknowns at some important positions. You look at the wide receiver position. But, I think the main thing I think you're going to get out of it when you're watching it is really just the style of play, especially offensively. When you bring in new guys like this, you're going to get a lot of base stuff. It's not going to be nothing crazy, but, are they throwing to the tight end? Are they throwing the check down? Are they doing things a little bit differently to help Bo Nix out of the pocket, make it a little more simple for him? And when you do things like that, you tend to elevate guys' play. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, it's really interesting to see how Derek Mason's going to package this stuff, see who he has playing where. I'm interested to see Ladarius Tennyson at safety. There's been a lot of good talk about him. So a lot of stuff to look forward to, and, hey, it just means you're one step closer to the season.
So what have been the storylines in spring here for Brian Harsin as Auburn obviously adjusts to a new staff?
Yeah. As a player, the schemes may change. The terminology is pretty much the hardest part. But I think you're going to see a more intricate route tree. And when you're getting used to new coaches, I had Jason Campbell on the show today. We're releasing that one tomorrow. And, he played for 4 different offensive coordinators. And it's not just the scheme. It's the style you're being coached at or the way that you're being coached. And when you have a guy like, Mike Bobo, who's been so intricate in so many guys, so many different quarterbacks' development, he always stays with the quarterback pretty much. And you add that with Brian Harsin, who is a quarterback himself and an offensive coordinator and a quarterback's coach. I think it really I think they'll take a little pressure off of it.
How much does a guy like Tank Bigsby, take pressure off a guy like Bo Nix, especially with a guy, and Mike Bobo, who definitely wants to emphasize running the football?
Yeah, well, people say it's going to be a blend of the Harsin and Bobo offense. I think that's going to be true. Now, how they install that is going to be up to them. But you're going to get mid-zone. You're going to get inside zone. You're going to get stretch. You're going to get your gap scheme from Bobo in the run game. But what I'm interested to see is Auburn's route combinations out of 12 personnel, out of 11 personnel. Like I said earlier, being able to use the tight end in the route, being able to throw the check down, using the running backs effectively. So while I do think you'll see some staples of Mike Bobo, I think Auburn will take their shot.
Jake Crain, host of the JBoy Show, joining us here on 3 and Out. Now, spring game's notorious for being kind of vanilla. How close do you think Brian Harsin and Mike Bobo, and even to some extent Derek Mason, kind of play that to the vest to try to just keep it as basic as possible to not let people see maybe what they're bringing to the table?
Yeah, well, like I said at the beginning, spring games are circumstantial, and in Auburn's circumstance, you're really still evaluating guys. So while they won't show everything, and you may see a trick play or two, they got to be able to call plays that they're going to call in the game so they can watch some of these new guys at wide receiver be able to run around and make plays. And, Derek Mason's still evaluating who he wants where and putting in new coverages and putting in new packages and seeing how guys rush the passer. So typically you don't see a lot of blitzing in the spring game, obviously. So I think you'll get a better feel from a coverage standpoint of what Auburn's base stuff is. But offensively, I think I don't think they're going to hold it as close to the vest as what people think.
What's the confidence level like in Bo Nix right now, and what does he need to do to be more consistent and effective this fall? And have you seen consistency from him this spring?
Yeah, I think the grade right now, because I want people to understand, 2 things can be true at the same time. Bo Nix needs to play better in the pocket. He needs to play through the pocket. He even needs to escape up through the pocket, throw the check down, do all that stuff. But the offensive line can also be bad at the same time. And that's something, Bo Nix has struggled with his first couple of years. They can't pass protect. And you're hoping that getting Will Friend in here, even though there hasn't been a ton of personnel changes, that you'll be able to see some, maturity in that group and understanding, because you hate to have to bring in tight ends to chip and go max pro more times than you want or have to do sprint out and stuff like that. So he's had a good spring. there's not a ton of competition behind him. I love the Demetrius Davis kid, the true freshman out of Texas. I think he's going to end up being a pretty good player, but he's still so young. But again, people need to understand it's not just one or the other. It's not, well, Bo Nix isn't good or the O-line isn't good. Both of those things could be true at the same time, but I think you're going to see Bo Nix take a step this next season.
And Jake, obviously, when you coach at Auburn, patience is not something that fan base is going to give you. What type of season is this Auburn team going to have, regardless if they're coming in with a new coach and both new coordinators?
Yeah, well, the schedule, especially when you're playing the SEC West, is never easy. You do get Bama and Georgia at home, but they're so much further ahead from a personnel standpoint than Auburn is, and that's no fault of Brian Harson's. I really think 8-4 would be a really good year with this schedule. You go to A&M, you go to an Arkansas team that's resurging under Sam Pittman. So I think anything 8-4 and above would be above expectation. A lot of this first year, and fans don't want to hear it. They want to win every game, and the coaches do too, and the players do too. But you got to look at the reality of the situation. This first season is going to be really big in setting the foundation and the culture that Brian Harsin wants moving forward. I use Bruce Pearl as an example all the time. His early teams weren't very talented because he was having to bring in his personnel, but they were able to do a few things. One of the teams made a run in the SEC tournament, but they were always tough. They always played defense. They always rebounded. And when they finally broke through and were bringing in, these 5-star guys, that culture didn't change. They had to conform to the culture. So that's what you're building right now.
Jake Crain, host of the JBoy Show, joining us here on 3 and Out. And Jake, you look at Derek Mason. Obviously, you want to set the tone defensively in the SEC. How quickly can he put his stamp on that defense early? And when you talk about a transition, how much of a transition do they expect there, especially on the defensive side, trying to come in and kind of get up to speed quickly?
Yeah, well, I thought Derek Mason, is one of the top guys you could get that was out there this offseason as the DC, being the former head coach at Vanderbilt and spending time out west at Stanford. And what he brings is a wealth of experience. He's a defensive savant. That's what he is. He's really good the way he packages stuff. I'm interested to see the coverages, how many combo coverages he's going to throw out there, how much man they run, how much zone they run. From a getting up to speed standpoint, I don't think, from the players' standpoint, I think the coaching staff's done a good job of relaying what they want. I don't think they've done too much or overloaded these guys because they got to evaluate them. They got to see them play as well, especially when you have a decent amount of new guys. But I think Nick Easton, to be honest with you, the defensive line coach, was a huge hire. I think you're going to see a step up in play from the defensive line, a few more pass rusher moves from the end. And then, they just moved J.J. Pegues to the interior on that defensive line. I'm interested to see how that works out. But I think Derek Mason's probably caught on faster than anybody. The players love him. The community loves him. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Auburn get back to playing some pretty stout defense.
Jake, the SEC West is as tough as it gets, and the names at the top. How do you see this division? I mean, where just about everybody can play with you. Probably everybody can play with you. And how does Auburn fit in?
Yeah, well, I think you'd be crazy not to pick Alabama, obviously, even with, what they lost. So the way that roster's built, the way they've recruited, Bryce Young's got a really bright future as long as he doesn't try and run the ball too much. But, you look at Alabama, I'm telling you right now, I look at Texas A&M, and everybody's saying, oh, Kellen Mond's gone, and they're going to take a step back. I think they're going to take a step forward. It's hard to beat an 11-1 season, but I think they're going to be right back there again, knocking on the door of being able to compete for a championship. I love what they have up front. I love what they've done defensively. Everybody talks about the offense, but the defense is what's changed that program. Haynes King, I like a lot, dual threat guy. I think Jimbo wants to open the offense up a little bit more, and you'll see that. So don't sleep on A&M. But where I see Auburn, I think probably third in the West. You look at Alabama. Wouldn't be surprised to see A&M there at 2. LSU, I think they're going to bounce back. I'm interested to see how this year goes, especially if it doesn't go great early. So I'd say Auburn probably about third in the West. Ole Miss and Mississippi State, where, Ole Miss has a lot of momentum with what Lane's doing over there. Sam Pittman at Arkansas, really love that hire, but he just doesn't have enough horses right now.
And Jake, you mentioned a guy like Nick Easton, who definitely, a guy that played in the NFL, a guy that played at Clemson, and then you talk about a guy, about as good as a running back you ever had with Cadillac with him, running the running backs, coaching those guys. How big is that? I know those coordinators are one thing, but to have guys that have done what these young men are doing, how much does that make those guys really get out there and really listen to a guy who kind of represent what they used to be, even though they're doing it now?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I thought Harsin did a great job of hiring, and I talk about culture and foundation and what that means, and Gene Chiswick used to say something I thought was pretty good. Auburn was made great before you got here. And I think that they are starting to put that fear, not into the players, but wanting to put that fear into the other teams that, when you play Auburn, it's going to be unbelievably physical, defensively, getting guys excited to play, playing through the whistle. When you get a chance to burying a guy. So I think that in all actuality, the way it's going to work out is you're going to see, and I'm not saying Auburn players weren't getting effort last year. I think they're going to be much more assignment focused, which to me falls into accountability. But when you have the staff they've put together, the guys that have accomplished what they've accomplished, you got a good chance of having a good foundation and a good culture.
Jake Crain, host of the JBoy Show, joining us here on 3 and Out. Jake, we appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Anytime, guys. Appreciate y'all.
Absolutely. And Auburn's got their spring game coming up this weekend. And again, maybe one of the more intriguing spring games, BJ, that we're going to see. New head coach, two pretty high-profile coordinators for the Southeastern Conference, and Mike Bobo and Derek Mason. How quickly can they get that turned around? I think it's going to say a lot about Auburn. And, Brian Harsin, give him credit. You come in, hey, I'm in new territory. I'm coming in. A lot of folks maybe don't know who I am around here. Oh, I got Mike Bobo and Derek Mason to help me out. Go get two great coordinators to help you get up to speed.
And what's their offensive identity going to be? Like you said, Ben, you have a veteran quarterback, but you also have a superstar at running back and a guy that can be kind of like what Auburn to be. Have that All-American running back and Bigsby that can give you 25 carries a game. What do you think their offensive identity should be, and how long will it take to get to that point where they feel comfortable and are effective with what they're doing?
Well, I agree a lot with what Jake was saying. I mean, BJ, as much as Tank Bigsby is definitely going to keep that offense balanced, I mean, you look at what offense has become now. These quarterbacks, they got to push the ball down the field. What he said, 12 personnel, that's another way of saying two tights, one running back, a couple of receivers. I think that when you look at – it's going to come down to Bo Nix. As much as I love Tank Bigsby, he's my second best running back coming back this year, besides, not named Harris coming out of USC. I think that when you look at this team, can you develop those guys on the outside? Because Tank Bigsby means they're gonna load the box. They're gonna force you to throw the football. Can Bo Nix get to a check down? Are you gonna put the tight end in the route, or are you gonna leave the tight end to block? And if those guys can't separate on the outside, Tank Bigsby, he's gonna have a lot of yards, but they trying to put more W's than losses. I think it's gonna come down to Bo Nix finding a way to get away from that sophomore slump. And dare I say, man, benefit from a Brian Harsin who, outside of Mike Bobo, he wants to throw the ball.
We've got more to come here on 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. We are streaming live at ESPNCoastal.com. Good to have you back, 3 and Out, all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin, BJ, and Ben, glad you are with us here on this Thursday. Braves a winner over the Marlins. They now head to Chicago for a weekend series before a 2-gamer in New York against the Yankees. So afternoon baseball tomorrow. Won't be here with you. Hopefully the Braves will be having a time in the Windy City. Really condensed version of the show today, thanks to the Braves and their late inning struggles and heroics all at the same time. So we'll move this to the final hour. Let's take 3 here on 3 and Out. In light of Ronald Acuna and his start to the season, I think he's batting darn near 500 at this point, like in all seriousness. What are the single best seasons you can remember in Atlanta sports history?
Wow. I mean, I have a feeling what he's doing right now is absolutely going to be up there. You think about Matt Ryan's MVP season when you go to the Super Bowl and probably should have won the Super Bowl and you didn't lose necessarily because you didn't have offensive production. I think that one's right up there when you think about winning an MVP, what that means, the statistical production, the all of the measurables you look for a great quarterback. Matt Ryan had that, and again, got your team to a Super Bowl. I think that's got to be right up there.
Matt Ryan win. That MVP season. I think I can't remember how many rushing yards Jamal had when he did the Dirty Bird. I can't remember how many yards he had, but I knew he was the face of the offense. I don't want to compare anything to what it's hard to compare anything to what Ronald Acuna is doing, Kevin, because it's so early in the season and he can literally do whatever they said. We talk about 40-40. Ozzie said he's going to do 50-50. If he wasn't talking about Ronald Acuna Jr., we wouldn't think that could be done. So I would definitely stick with Jamal with the Dirty Bird. Back in the day. I think he might have led the league in rushing that year, but I don't like comparing people to Ronald Acuna Jr. only because I don't think it's fair to them. Because BJ, he just hit another home run. It's like this dude can do anything you need to do. The only way we're gonna win is, Ronald Acuna goes, 5 for 5, 2 home runs, and hit for the cycle. What he just
Let me ask y'all this real quick about Acuna because I saw he's now leading the majors in home runs. This is going to be one of those seasons. Kevin, what is a realistic stat line in your mind? You're the baseball guy. I know we're sitting here mid-April, but what is a potential, just fun to talk about, realistic stat line for Ronald?
Well, he bats leadoff, so that's kind of interesting to see where it goes. But if he continues to hit home runs at this pace, and I started to say, could he get 100 RBI? Well, if you believe he could hit 50 homers, well, that's halfway there just on solo homers alone. So I think if he continues this pace, and this could be, I don't think this pace is continuable because it's just insane right now. But I think 50-40 could be in the mark. I don't think you run enough really in baseball anymore to say 50-50, get 50 stolen bases. I just don't think that's the way baseball's played, but 50-40, 50-35, I think that's certainly doable. And I think he could probably land in the leadoff spot between 90 and 95 RBI. That would be just straight insanity. He's hitting 442 right now. That doesn't happen. And again, it's 2 weeks, and maybe you see a Mike Trout or a guy like that have a 442 stretch over a couple of weeks. As Ben said, you're 12 games in. The key is, what does it look like in late May? If he's still hitting close to 400 in late May, obviously he is scorching the league at that point. So how long can he keep this pace going will be interesting, because the fact of the matter is, if nobody else on the Braves start to step up, BJ, well, what does the strategy become? Fine, walk him, take him out of the game. And that's how you get some of those all-time numbers. Is how did Barry Bonds do what he did? Well, people were scared to pitch to him, except in certain situations. And then outside of that, they walked him. We saw somebody walk him with the bases loaded one time because it was better to face the guy behind him than him. So I don't know if we'll quite get to that point, but I do know early in the game, if the guy in the number 2 hole, and that was Ozzie, but now if Freddie Freeman starts hitting, it might change things. But guy in the number 2 hole is not hitting. It's pretty easy what the strategy is going to be till he cools off, and that is, there's first base, go stand over there, and we'll deal with everybody else. All right, take 2 at 47 years old, and we checked in just a minute ago. Stuart Sink leading the RBC Heritage at 8 under. I think he's got a shot lead at last check. What sport will you be a lead at 47? This is PGA Tour high-level golf, you're leading the RBC at 47.
Yeah, very impressive. I think it's ping pong because I've always had a natural ping pong ability that y'all saw at media days. Y'all saw it. Y'all know. So I don't want to hear anything. And I think that kind of stays with you, right? It's like a natural coordination, a natural response, kind of a timing. And I think that stays true, even as you age. So I'm going to say ping pong for me.
For me, walks that raise money. Anything that I can walk and raise money for, I think I can be a lead at it. I really think I can get out there and say, look, this is the fifth organization that I've tried to raise money for this year. Nothing super duper athletic, Kevin, because the whole thing about it is this. They got these things called phones and they got cameras on them. So I can't even lie and say I was balling. You like, you sure you were balling? Because somebody was in the corner. You kind of went viral. So I'm going to say, raising money, raising awareness and money for any organization that you get to walk in, I can go out there and say 3, 2, 1, let's go, people. I can actually finish it out. We're looking a little bit respectable.
I thought for sure BJ was going to take that opportunity to rag you about 5K running, and
that's fine. I mean, listen, sticks and stones. Things happen. You got to know your limitations. And Kevin, I was like, all right, BJ want me to run with him. Now, I did. I never said I was going to finish with you. That was never part of it. Kevin was like, all right, man, Kevin said, listen, I'm fine. I'm going to make sure you guys come through it. Now, I will say this. Ego did kind of get the best of me. Because when I looked, I said, why people got to be standing at the finish line? So maybe maybe the length of a football field, I kind of jogged through. People clapped for me. I don't know if they was clapping before I made it.
We were waiting. That's the problem. We were waiting.
Like I said, I mean, they had a guy that was out there that's like a runner. He ran the course twice, and I still ain't made it through. I was like, why don't you put the shirt on and calm down? What you out here trying to prove? Get out of here, man.
Just do like me. Running and elite and me never been in the same sentence ever. So I don't know. It is pretty impressive. I think golf. If I was going to have a shot at anything, it'd be golf. But I mean, that's 4 years off for me, so it's not that far out there. I know this. A lot more stuff hurts every morning when I get up. It's hard to be elite when you're getting up out of bed every morning. That's all I'll say about that. Then finally take 3. Let's have a little fun with the day because Christian and I were again nitpicking at each other in the office today, and he said, "Well, what is one thing I could say that just escalates it and puts you over the top?" We're like, you're going back and forth, and you're like. I was like, don't call me Bud. I was like, that's one that's like, all right, Bud. I was like, wait a minute. That will take me to the next level. You're like, hey, pal. That you see people do that, or friend. That you're getting an argument like, hey, friend, just chill out. No, I'm not your friend. You chill out. What's a word that an innocuous word that will escalate a confrontation?
I don't know. I think with you and I, it's like when you stop talking, when you go, okay, I'm done. Because historically, you and I'll try to get you in these deep back and forth conversations, and whether it's about sports or whatever, we'll be going back and forth. And you've done this even on the air before to me, but you'll go, okay, I'm done, and you'll walk off, and I'll follow you, and I'll still be trying to talk, and the more you shut it down, the more I keep coming, and it just makes it worse for both of us. But I think when you always say to me, okay, I'm done, I think that's always a good one.
No, me and BJ talk about this a lot. The one word that escalates things more is when you tell somebody to relax. They go, no, you relax. I don't know what telling somebody to relax. No, you relax. Or, we're like, man, or we tell somebody to calm. Never in the history of relaxing or calming down did the person being told to relax or calm down actually do that. Or this is the real, this the one now. Seriously. That's gonna escalate stuff because I need you to be on my level. I mean, now y'all talking about doing a word like buddy. Somebody goes, dude, or my thing with BJ is, dude, what are you doing? BJ, what do you mean? I mean, I just think that let's just face it, Kevin. We're all on edge. We were talking to Matt Smith earlier. You know why Matt Smith? And I mean this in a loving way. The reason why Matt Smith couldn't remember things because Matt Smith is married now, so it's a little bit different now, Kevin.
That's true. I forgot about that.
Alabama's offensive line again. I gotta be on. Get off. So I just believe that relax, calm down, seriously, or really. Yeah. Hey, it used to be a time those words didn't get to you. You had marriage and children and bills and taxes. Say one more word to me.
I will say this: the one that will get me in trouble, and I'll say this before we go to break, but the one that will get me in trouble with the wife, if we are having a discussion, shall we say, is if I just go, all right, whatever, and then and then it's on. It's on from there. But
I got it. I got it. This is the main one. For the married guys out there, the 2 words that get you in trouble. You're right. And I'm being complimentary. What? You're right.
You're right. We'll continue a discussion all day, every day
Never say, okay,
in the marriage household for sure. We've got more to cover. That Stakes 3. It's 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Great to be here with you on this Thursday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben. Braves a winner this afternoon. Thankfully, don't get swept by the Marlins. So that means they still haven't been swept by the Marlins at Truist Park and haven't been swept by the Marlins in any capacity since 2015. So there's that bit of good news. And then the Braves, BJ and Ben, go to Chicago tomorrow. So no 3-and-out tomorrow as they play those traditional day games up there at Wrigley Field. And we'll see if the Braves can get a little momentum going.
Let's win some games.
That was very succinct analysis.
Keep doing your thing. Keep doing your thing, Pablo. Forget what Kevin says. We love you.
I was like, DJ, we go to you for all the hot takes. Win some games.
Act like you want to be here. I don't know what that means. Act like you want to be here.
We've got so we'll have the Braves for you tomorrow. Day games all around here in Chicago, and then back on the road again on Tuesday and Wednesday up in New York against the Yankees. So pretty tough opening stretch here. I think that's important to keep in mind, fellas. The Braves played a very tough stretch against some great pitching here in the first 2.5 weeks or so of the season. We will see you on Monday. Braves and Cubs tomorrow. This is 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network.